I'm Rachel Morgan, 36 years old and a single mom to the brightest 10-year-old girl you'll ever meet. Her name's Emily, and she's the kind of kid who makes strangers smile just by walking into a room. The day of my sister's engagement party started with hope. I had bought us both new dresses, practiced manners, and small talk with Emily for weeks. I believed that maybe, just maybe, this would be the day our family finally saw us for who we really were, not as the overlooked ones, but as people worth celebrating. I parked my old Honda between a pair of shiny black BMWs, held Emily's hand, and told myself we belonged here too. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever had to stand tall for someone you love, even when it meant standing alone. I've lived in Greenville, North Carolina my whole life. I teach second grade at the same elementary school I went to as a kid. Most days, it's just me and Emily figuring things out as we go. Her father left when she was 3, said he wasn't ready for a family, walked out, and never looked back. Since then, I've worn every hat there is: mother, provider, tutor, coach, comforter, all while grading papers and attending parent-teacher nights that sometimes included my own students' parents. It hasn't been easy, but we've made something real, something good. Our apartment is small, but it's full of love. The fridge is covered in Emily's drawings. We have Sunday pancakes and movie nights with popcorn and old mixing bowls. Every Friday, we walk to the park with a blanket and a picnic dinner, just the two of us. That's our world. It may not be fancy, but it's ours. My sister Melissa's life couldn't be more different. She's 2 years younger with a condo overlooking the river and a corporate job that came straight out of our father's network. While I juggled college with waitressing and student loans, she breezed through a private university fully paid for. When she landed a job at a big marketing firm, our parents celebrated like she'd won the lottery. Meanwhile, my job, my passion for teaching, earned polite nods at best. Family dinners turned into performance reviews. Melissa's raises her vacations, her new car always front and center. I got asked if I'd ever considered a side job or if I had a 5-year plan. I stopped trying to compete, but I never wanted Emily to feel like we weren't enough. Then Melissa got engaged to James Sullivan. His family owns half the real estate development projects in the region, and suddenly everything was about merging two dynasties. When Melissa called to invite us to the engagement party, I said yes right away. I told myself maybe this time would be different. Maybe a wedding would bring us closer. "This is a very upscale event, Rachel," she said over the phone. "Emily will need to be on her absolute best behavior." Of course, I told her. I didn't mention how hurtful it was to even have to say that. I spent what little extra I had on a navy blue cocktail dress from a clearance rack, simple but elegant. For Emily, I found a white dress with embroidered flowers that made her eyes sparkle. We practiced manners, how to hold a glass with 2 hands, how to stay close to me if she felt overwhelmed. She was excited. "Do you think Uncle James will dance with me at the wedding?" she asked. I said I was sure he would, even though James had barely said more than a few words to her in 2 years. The Pine Creek Country Club was something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, a staff in black vests offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Emily whispered, "It looks like a castle," and squeezed my hand. Melissa greeted us at the entrance in a white gown that looked custom-made. She barely smiled. "You're 15 minutes late," she said. I apologized, offered congratulations. Emily handed her a small gift bag. We'd picked out a candle with her favorite scent. Melissa didn't even open it. She told us to find our parents and make a good impression, then turned away to greet someone else. We wandered through the crowd, past polished tables and people in tailored suits. My parents were at the bar. They hugged. Emily complimented her curls and then turned to me with the usual reminders about networking opportunities and how teaching might not be enough long term. "You should be thinking bigger," my father said. especially with your situation. Emily and I eventually found a quiet corner with some snacks away from the stairs. One woman, Catherine Foster James's aunt, actually smiled at us, complimented Emily, and treated her like a guest who mattered. It was the first warmth we'd felt all afternoon, but it didn't last. The party moved into speeches and toasts. Melissa's voice rang through the room, thanking everyone except us. Emily tugged at my sleeve, asking quietly for more punch. I nodded, and we made our way to the refreshment table. I remember how carefully she held the glass with both hands, how crowded it was, how a man gesturing too wildly stepped back without seeing her. The bump was small. The splash wasn't. Bright red punch spilled across the front of Melissa's dress. The room went silent. Emily's voice barely carried. "I'm so sorry, Aunt Melissa. It was an accident." Melissa looked down at her ruined gown. Then she looked at my daughter. That's when everything changed. Melissa's face twisted as she looked down at her gown, deep red punch soaking into the fabric like a spreading bruise. The room stayed quiet, not a shocked kind of quiet, but the kind where everyone's waiting to see what happens next. Emily stood frozen beside me, still holding the empty glass with both hands. Her lips parted like she wanted to say more, but Melissa got there first. "You little brat." Her voice didn't sound like hers anymore. It was loud, sharp, too fast. Before I could get between them, her hand was already in the air. The slap cracked through the room. It was loud enough that someone near the windows gasped. I saw Emily's head jerk sideways, saw her small frame wobble, then fall. Her back hit the polished floor first. The glass rolled away, tapping against someone's shoe. I didn't move right away. Something in my mind just wouldn't process what I'd seen, but the mark on Emily's face, already blooming pink, snapped me out of it. I dropped to my knees and pulled her close. She didn't cry out, just covered her cheek with one hand and looked up at me wide-eyed and quiet, like she didn't quite understand what had just happened. Servers had stopped moving. A waiter holding a tray of champagne stood frozen mid-step. A few guests whispered, and one woman nearby said, "Oh, my Lord," under her breath. Two younger men had their phones out, angled toward us. Melissa pointed at her dress like it explained everything. "Do you see this? Do you know how much this cost?" "She's 10, I said, helping Emily to sit upright. "It was an accident." "She's been running wild all afternoon." Melissa snapped, her voice climbing. "This is why kids don't belong at events like this." James came over, clearly trying to calm her. "Melissa, maybe just don't you dare," she barked, pulling her arm away from him. "My dress is destroyed. The photos are ruined. Everything's ruined." My parents rushed over, but they didn't go to Emily. My mother gasped when she saw Melissa's dress. "Oh, honey," she said, brushing at the fabric uselessly. "Your beautiful gown." My father turned to me, frowning hard. "This is exactly why we asked you to be careful. Some places just aren't meant for children, especially ones who haven't been taught how to behave." The words hit like cold water. Emily clung to my arm, the red mark on her cheek turning darker. "She was bumped by a guest," I said. She apologized immediately. "And your daughter hit her." "Don't exaggerate," my mother said with a wave of her hand. "It was a reflex. Barely even touched her." Emily's body trembled against me. She wasn't sobbing loudly, just holding it in eyes down, breathing too fast. I kept my arm tight around her shoulder. "Your sister's entire engagement party is ruined," my father said, "because your daughter couldn't hold a glass properly. She got hit," I said louder this time, hard enough to knock her down. James's parents had joined us by now. His mother's mouth was tight. "Perhaps it's best you take your daughter home," she said with a practiced, concerned tone. "She's upset. We'd like to avoid further disruption." Melissa nodded. "Yes, leave. You've done enough damage." I held Emily close and took a slow breath. She spilled a drink. Melissa hit a child. Two security guards came over, one older, the other young. The older one asked, "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," Melissa jumped in before I could answer. "My sister and her daughter are creating a scene. They need to go." The older guard looked at Emily, saw her cheek. His whole expression changed. "Ma'am," he said to me, "would you like to step outside for a moment? It was meant to give me a way out. A quiet exit." But everything inside me resisted. I stood a little taller. "No," I said, "but I would like to report an assault." You could feel the air shift. People nearby stopped pretending not to listen. Melissa's mouth fell open. "Assault? Are you out of your mind? It was a slap." The guard straightened. "Did someone strike the child?" he asked me directly. "Yes," I said. "My sister hit my daughter. You can see the mark." My mother tried to cut in. "Oh, please! Rachel is blowing this out of proportion. That child has always been sensitive. This family used to understand the value of discipline." "She's not Melissa's child," I said. "She has no right to touch her. Not like that." My father leaned close, speaking low. "Stop this now or you're done. You understand me. You're cut off." I didn't answer him. Emily looked up at me, voice small but steady. "It's okay, Mom. We can go." I knelt again. "It's not okay," I whispered. "It's not okay to hurt people and pretend it's normal." She nodded and squeezed my hand. James stepped forward, voice hushed. "Look, what if we made a generous contribution? For Emily's future, there's no need to escalate things. You're offering me money to forget this." He looked down. "No, I just thought—" Melissa cut in again. "You'll regret this. When you're jobless and no one in the district will hire you, you'll wish you just left." I glanced around. Several guests were still filming. I noticed Catherine James's aunt standing off to the side, arms crossed, watching closely. From the phone in my hand, the 911 dispatcher asked, "Are you and the child safe at the moment?" "Yes," I said. "We're in a public space surrounded by people." About 10 minutes later, 2 police officers walked in. The room had gone cold quiet. Chatter along stairs, silverware left untouched. The taller officer had short gray hair. The younger one followed him as they moved toward us. "I understand you reported an assault on a minor," the woman officer said. "Yes," I told her. "My daughter was slapped." The officer crouched down. "Hi there, I'm Officer Lopez. May I take a look at your face?" Emily nodded. The officer gently examined the bruise, then took photos. "Can you tell me what happened?" she asked. I gave her everything, from the spilled punch to the slap to what came after. The second officer took notes. I mentioned the videos. "I have one," Catherine said, stepping forward. "I started recording right after Melissa raised her voice. I captured the threats, too." The officer nodded. "That'll help." When they approached Melissa, she burst into tears. I didn't mean to hurt her. It was just a reaction. My dress was ruined. I'd never hit her on purpose. My mother backed her up. It was a tap. Rachel always makes things bigger than they are. The officers didn't respond to that. One of them simply said, "Striking a child even once can be considered assault under state law. We'll proceed accordingly." James stood back silent now. Officer Lopez returned to me with a card. "We'll be issuing a citation to Melissa Foster for simple assault. You'll be asked to appear in court. You may also want to file for a temporary restraining order." Behind her, I heard Melissa whisper sharply, "You've ruined everything." "No," I said quietly. "You did." As we stepped out into the night air, Emily held my hand tighter than she had all day. "Are Grandma and Grandpa going to hate us now?" she asked. I didn't lie. "They're angry, yes, but we did the right thing." She nodded and looked up at me. "You stood up. Like for real." I squeezed her hand. "So did you." We walked to the car away from the lights, the music, and the noise behind those country club doors. The ride home was quiet. Emily kept her head against the window, watching the streetlights flicker past. I glanced over every few minutes, checking the outline of her cheek, where the mark still sat faint now, but real. She didn't ask any questions, didn't talk about what had happened. She just held on to the stuffed elephant we kept in the car for long rides, the one she'd had since preschool. When we pulled into the parking lot, she waited for me to come around and open her door, something she hadn't done in years. Her fingers slid into mine as we walked up the stairs. Neither of us said much while we changed into pajamas, brushed our teeth, turned down the sheets. But when I leaned over to switch off her lamp, she stopped me. "Can you stay for a little?" she asked. I sat beside her, resting my back against the headboard. "Is Aunt Melissa going to jail?" she asked after a few minutes. "No," I said, "but the police are going to file a report. There'll be a court date." Emily nodded like she understood more than a 10-year-old should. "I don't think Grandma and Grandpa like me very much," she said next. I didn't answer that right away. I tucked the blanket around her shoulders, smoothed her hair away from her forehead. I think I finally said, "Some people love in ways that don't always feel good. That doesn't mean it's your fault." The silence stretched long. Then she whispered, "I didn't mean to spill it." "I know, sweetheart. I know." That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. Voicemails from my parents, one from Melissa, 2 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't listen to any of them. I just stared, unsure what to do with the ache that had settled deep in my chest. The next morning, I kept Emily home from school. We curled up on the couch and watched movies. Around lunchtime, I called a child therapist I'd found online and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. Dr. Bennett greeted us in a cozy office filled with soft lighting and shelves of games and books. She didn't push Emily to talk. Instead, she let her pick out crayons and draw while they chatted about everything from school to her favorite snacks. At the end of the hour, Dr. Bennett walked me out into the hallway. "She's holding a lot inside," she said gently, "but she's steady. The fact that she feels safe with you makes all the difference." That night, I lay awake longer than usual. My body was tired, but my mind wouldn't quiet. I kept going back to that moment in the ballroom, the sharp sound, the way Emily's body folded in on itself, the silence that followed. The next few days blurred together. I returned to work on Wednesday. As soon as I stepped into the front office, the principal, Dr. Washington, called me into her office. "Rachel," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I wanted to let you know the school district supports you. We've had a few calls. Concerned citizens trying to stir things up. But I've reviewed your file. Your record speaks for itself." She slid a document across the desk. "We're limiting access to your personnel information for now. Just a precaution." My throat tightened. I nodded, managed a quiet, "Thank you." She looked at me over her glasses. "You did the right thing." On Thursday, Emily returned to school. Her teacher, Mrs. Garcia, called me after lunch. "She's doing well," she said. Some of the kids asked about the bruise, but Emily just said there was a problem in the family, and her mom helped fix it. Then she went right back to working on her science project. That evening, as I was putting away dishes, a new email came in. Subject, "Just checking in." From Catherine Foster. "Rachel, I wanted to see how you and Emily are doing. I meant what I said at the party. What happened wasn't acceptable, and I admire how you handled it. James has postponed the wedding. He told his parents he needs time to think things through. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out." Warmly, Catherine. I stared at the screen for a while, unsure how to respond. Eventually, I just typed a simple thank you and hit send. By Friday, a certified letter arrived from my parents' attorney. It was stiffly worded warning that they might contest the restraining order I had filed against Melissa. There were phrases like long-term family interests and potential reputational harm. I scanned the rest, then forwarded it to the pro bono attorney I'd spoken to earlier in the week. Her reply came within the hour. This is textbook intimidation. The temporary restraining order stands. Given the evidence and witness statements, it's highly likely the judge will grant the full order next week. That night, Emily sat on the floor of the living room cutting shapes out of construction paper for a school project. I brought her a bowl of strawberries and sat beside her. "Do you think I ruined Aunt Melissa's party?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I watched her glue down a red triangle and reach for a glitter pen. "No," I said. "I think some people made a choice about what mattered most to them, and you weren't one of those things." She didn't say anything after that, but when she leaned against my shoulder, I let her stay there as long as she wanted. By the weekend, the video someone had posted from the engagement party had gone viral, not just locally, but further than I ever imagined. The clip showed Melissa's outburst, my parents' reaction, and the police arriving. I started getting messages from old classmates, former co-workers, and a few other single moms I'd met in passing over the years. Most of them just said, "I saw what happened. You did the right thing." Still, every time the phone rang from a number I didn't know, I hesitated. I'd learned to expect both support and judgment. Sunday morning, as I made pancakes, Emily stood at the counter with her sketchbook. "Can we still have our movie night?" she asked. "We never stopped," I said, flipping one onto her plate. Later that night, after the credits rolled, she asked again, "Are Grandma and Grandpa going to stop talking to us forever? I didn't promise anything." "I don't know, sweetheart, but I know we'll be okay." She nodded, pulled the blanket up to her chin. "Some families are nice," she said. "Some aren't." I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "We build our own." The hearing for the restraining order was scheduled for Tuesday morning. I knew it wouldn't be the end of it, but I also knew it was the next step. Tuesday morning came with a gray sky and a light drizzle. Emily sat in the back seat, hugging her backpack as I drove us toward the courthouse. She had a sketch pad tucked under her arm and headphones resting around her neck, though she hadn't turned them on. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't try to fill the silence. We pulled into the parking lot just before 8:30. I had told her ahead of time that she didn't need to speak, that she wouldn't even have to sit in the courtroom if she didn't want to, but she wanted to come with me. "I want to be near you," she'd said the night before. Inside, the building smelled like old carpet and paper. We checked in at the front desk, passed through security, and waited in a quiet hallway outside the courtroom. My attorney met us there calm and professional and asked again if I was sure about moving forward. I'm sure I told her. When the doors opened and our case was called, we stepped inside. Emily stayed in the back with my attorney's assistant, while I took a seat up front. My parents were already there, dressed in matching navy and gray. They didn't acknowledge me. Their attorney stood beside them, flipping through a thick folder. Melissa wasn't there. The judge entered and reviewed the file. "The respondent's absence does not delay the hearing," she said, glancing down at the paperwork. "We have documented evidence witness statements and photographic proof of injury to a minor. Let's proceed." The hearing was brief. I answered a few questions about what happened, confirmed the police report, and provided a copy of the medical referral we'd received for Emily's follow-up care. My parents' attorney objected, once suggesting family reconciliation as a better path, but the judge shook her head. "Safety comes first," she said, "especially for a child." She signed the order and handed it back to the clerk. "This one-year restraining order will remain in effect. No direct contact, no contact through third parties, no digital messages or posts. If violated, criminal charges may follow." As we stood to leave, my father stepped forward. "This has gone far enough, Rachel," he said, his voice low. "Your sister's career is on the line. Her engagement is hanging by a thread." "Are you proud of this?" I didn't answer him right away. I turned slightly so Emily wouldn't hear. I didn't slap a child at a public event, I said. These are the consequences of Melissa's decisions, not mine. He let out a short breath through his nose. You always were stubborn, just like your grandmother. I'll take that as a compliment. He didn't reply. I walked away. Outside, Emily was waiting with her sketch pad in her lap, drawing flowers and pencil along the edges of the page. Are we going home now? She asked. Yeah, I said, brushing her bangs back with my hand. We're going home. Later that week, the aftermath reached places I hadn't expected. The video from the party had gained traction online. It was being reposted by parenting groups, family law advocates, even a few local news blogs. My voicemail filled up within hours. Some were from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousins, old friends, a neighbor from when I was a kid. Most of them just said they were sorry they hadn't known. Some told me they'd seen signs long ago. The district office called me the following Monday. I braced myself, expecting tension, maybe even pressure to stay quiet. Instead, I was asked to come in for a meeting. Dr. Washington was already there when I arrived, along with the superintendent and a representative from HR. We want you to know we're aware of the public attention, the superintendent said. We've reviewed the footage, the court records, and your personnel history. There's no concern about your position with us. He slid a folder across the table. In fact, we'd like to offer you the lead teacher role for your grade level. Your commitment to children's well-being hasn't gone unnoticed. I sat still for a moment, unsure what to say. Dr. Washington smiled gently. Your integrity came through loud and clear. We just wanted to make sure you felt supported here. Thank you, I said quietly. That means more than you know. Emily returned to school later that week with a note from Dr. Bennett saying she was cleared to resume full classroom activity. Mrs. Garcia sent me a quick email the next day. She's doing well, it read. A little quieter than usual, but when someone made a rude comment during group work, Emily stood up and said, "That's not how we treat people in this classroom." Then she went right back to coloring. On Friday afternoon, a small envelope arrived in our mailbox. No return address. Inside was a check made out to Emily's college fund for $5,000. There was a note written on thick paper in tidy cursive for a future built on strength and safety. KF. I had a strong feeling it came from Catherine Foster, but there was no way to know for sure. By the following week, my cousin Taylor reached out. I hadn't spoken to her in over 3 years. We met for coffee on a rainy Saturday morning at a place near her job. I saw everything she said holding her cup between both hands, and I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. We talked for almost 2 hours. She told me about her own experiences, the quiet ways our family had made her feel small, overlooked, unwanted. I left those gatherings for a reason, she said. I just didn't think anyone else noticed. You weren't alone, I said. A few days later, I got an email from James. He kept it short. Rachel. After a lot of thinking, I've ended my relationship with Melissa. The incident with Emily forced me to take a hard look at the patterns I've been ignoring. I've started therapy. I've suggested she do the same. I don't expect anything from you, but I wanted you to know. I'm grateful for how you stood your ground. It changed more than you know. Wishing you and Emily peace. James, I didn't write back. I wasn't sure what I would even say. That weekend, Emily and I planted basil on the windowsill. She wanted to learn how to cook grown-up meals, so we started with spaghetti and garlic bread. She measured everything carefully, standing on her step stool in socked feet. As we cleaned up the kitchen, she asked, "Do you think we'll talk to Grandma and Grandpa again?" I rinsed a plate and thought about how to answer. Maybe I said, but only if things really change. She nodded like she understood. I'm okay with that, she said. We're okay already. I dried my hands and turned off the sink. She wasn't wrong. The week after the hearing moved slowly. Emily went back to school on Monday, but I walked her to the classroom door instead of just dropping her off at the curb like we used to. She didn't ask me to, but she didn't let go of my hand until her teacher opened the door. At work, things had settled. The new role came with more meetings and responsibilities, but Dr. Washington made sure I wasn't overwhelmed. A few teachers stopped me in the hallway to say they'd seen the video. They didn't bring up details, just said they were thinking of us. That Thursday afternoon, a formal envelope arrived. I recognized the law firm name printed in the top corner. Inside was a letter brief to the point letting me know that Melissa had accepted a plea deal. She would serve 6 months of probation, complete an anger management course, and do a set number of hours at a local children's advocacy center. I read it twice before folding it back into the envelope. That same evening, my parents called. I let it ring through. Then my mother left a voicemail. "Rachel," she said, "we've been talking with Pastor Michael about how families move forward after difficult situations. We'd like to meet with someone, your child therapist, if you think that makes sense. Maybe that's a step." She didn't say sorry, but it was the first message that hadn't ended with blame. I called Dr. Bennett the next morning to ask what that kind of meeting would look like. She said she'd walk us through it one step at a time. The first appointment was the following Tuesday. My parents showed up 10 minutes early, both dressed as if it were Sunday morning service. We sat in a quiet room with Dr. Bennett between us. Emily wasn't there for that first session. My father looked uncomfortable the entire time. My mother spoke first. "We want to understand what happened," she said. "Not just the slap, but all of it." Dr. Bennett nodded, asked them what they believed had happened. My father used the word discipline. My mother used the word incident. Dr. Bennett let them finish, then said plainly, "Striking a child, especially one who had already apologized for an accident, isn't discipline, it's harm. And defending that behavior teaches children that love comes with conditions." Neither of them responded right away, but my mother did nod. Over the next few weeks, we worked in small steps, short supervised visits in public places. Emily never had to be alone with them. I stayed close. We went to a park one Sunday, then a pancake diner the following weekend. My father mostly observed. My mother asked questions about school, commented on how tall Emily was getting, brought her a small flower from her garden wrapped in a paper towel. For Emily's birthday, they gave her a handmade card. It had no money inside, no gift card, just a note that said, "We love you. We're learning. Thank you for your patience." That spring, Melissa and I didn't speak. The restraining order was still in effect, and I had no interest in testing its limits. But through our parents, I heard she was working again this time at a smaller firm outside the city. The same firm, oddly enough, where she was doing her community service hours. I didn't know if that was coincidence or some kind of arrangement. In May, I got a text from Catherine Foster. "Coffee next week. I have something I'd like to share." We met at a small cafe near the courthouse. She wore a denim jacket and flat shoes, and she held a manila folder in her lap. "I've been where you are," she said after we sat down. "My first husband was charming in public, harsh in private. My family didn't believe me until it was too late." She pushed the folder across the table. Inside were resources, legal contacts, scholarship information, support networks for single parents. "I watched my nephew almost marry into something toxic," she said. "It shook something loose in me. I just wanted to say thank you. I didn't know what to say." I nodded, and she reached over to touch my hand once before leaving. In June, the school year ended. Emily's final report card was full of positive comments. Emerging leadership, quiet confidence, compassionate, peer support. Her teacher, Mrs. Garcia, handed me an envelope at pickup. Inside was a copy of an essay Emily had written for the end-of-year project. Title: My Mom, My Hero. She had written about the party, about standing beside someone even when it's hard, about how being brave doesn't always mean yelling or fighting. Sometimes it means saying, "That's enough." I kept the essay in my top drawer at home. That same week I got another letter. This one was handwritten and came in a plain white envelope with no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Rachel, I've been going to anger management sessions, at first just because I had to, but I've started to learn things I didn't expect, about how control feels like safety, how perfection became a mask, and how I took that out on people who didn't deserve it, especially Emily. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking to be let back in. I just wanted to say I know what I did, and I'm sorry. Melissa. There was no flair to the letter, no excuses, just words on paper. I showed the letter to Dr. Bennett. She read it carefully, then looked up. "This is accountability," she said. "What happens next is still up to you. And it doesn't have to happen all at once." Later that evening, Emily and I made spaghetti with the basil from our windowsill. She insisted on adding extra garlic. After dinner, she asked if we could take the long way home from the park so she could look at the summer flowers. We walked slowly side by side. "Do you think people can really change?" she asked. "I think some people try," I said, "and some people don't." She thought for a moment, then said, "I think I'd be okay seeing Aunt Melissa again. One day, but not yet. There's no rush," I told her. She nodded. By the time summer arrived, things felt quieter. Emily and I found a rhythm that suited us. We joined a community garden 2 blocks from our apartment. Every Saturday morning she'd pull on her sun hat and carry our little watering can down the sidewalk, ready to check on the strawberry plants we'd adopted. In the evenings, we took walks after dinner. Sometimes we'd stop for ice cream if the heat lingered too long. She was sleeping better, smiling more. And though she still asked questions, sometimes they didn't come with the same weight they had in the spring. I kept up with my own therapy. The work was slower, harder. There were patterns I hadn't seen clearly before, the way I apologized for everything, the way I measured my worth by how little trouble I caused. Dr. Linton. My therapist had a way of letting silence do half the work. I'd sit there with my hands folded tightly in my lap and she'd ask, "When did you first learn to keep the peace at your own expense?" It wasn't always a question I could answer, but I tried. Melissa completed her probation quietly. She finished her anger management course and, according to our parents, continued with private therapy. The restraining order remained in place, and neither of us broke that boundary. One afternoon in late July, my mother called to ask if we could meet at a library branch halfway between us. She said she and my father wanted to speak with Emily's therapist again. I agreed on the condition that the meeting be with Dr. Bennett present. This time they came alone. No lawyers, no notes in hand, just 2 people who looked older than I remembered. Dr. Bennett began the session by reviewing the agreement we'd put in place: no direct contact with Emily, no unsupervised visits, and any future involvement would require consistent participation in therapy. My father sat back in his chair, arms crossed. In my day, he said children were expected to respect authority. That's how we were raised. Dr. Bennett nodded once, and many children in that generation also carried unspoken pain. There's a difference between teaching and hurting. He didn't respond. My mother sat forward slightly. "We've been reading," she said. "Our pastor gave us some materials about intergenerational discipline, and we've been meeting with him weekly." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a letter she'd written to Emily shorthand, written no apology, but an acknowledgement that things had not been handled the right way. "We don't expect you to give this to her now," she said, "but we'd like her to have it someday." I took the letter without saying anything. After the session, I tucked it into the back of my journal. Emily didn't ask about it, and I didn't bring it up. Her birthday came in early August. We invited a few close friends from school, some kids from the garden, and Taylor's children. The party was simple lemon cupcakes, sidewalk chalk water balloons, no big gifts, no pressure, just laughter and a messy picnic table. My parents came for the last 20 minutes. They stayed on the edge of the group, handed Emily a card, and sat beside me on the bench. My father didn't say much. My mother watched Emily the whole time. When they left, she said softly, "She's a good girl. We see that now." I nodded. She always was. That same week, Catherine Foster invited us over for dinner. It was a small thing, just soup salad and fresh bread from her neighbor's bakery. She asked Emily about school and told stories about her own childhood, how she used to walk through the woods behind her grandfather's house and come back covered in briars. After dessert, she and I stayed at the table while Emily drew in the next room. "I've seen a lot of families," Catherine said, "and I've seen how hard it is to be the one who breaks the pattern." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. That fall, school started up again. I stepped into my new role as lead teacher, and Emily moved into 5th grade. She came home every day with stories about her new classmates and what she wanted to be for Halloween, Mrs. Garcia told me she'd volunteered to be line leader during fire drills and had spoken up when another student was being teased. "She's steady," her teacher said. "Kind, confident. It's clear she knows she's safe." One afternoon in September, I got a letter forwarded to my email from Dr. Bennett. It was from Melissa's therapist requesting a preliminary conversation about restorative justice. The message was clear, no pressure, just an invitation. It was Melissa's idea. I didn't respond right away. I read the message twice, then printed it out and brought it to my next therapy session. Dr. Linton asked, "How does it feel to read it?" I didn't have a neat answer. But by the end of the hour, I had decided to agree to one meeting, not to reopen anything, not to forgive or forget, but to hear what she had to say. We met at the therapist's office in a neutral room with soft walls and 2 chairs set a careful distance apart. Melissa looked thinner than I remembered. Her posture was different, less rigid. "I know I can't fix what I did," she said, her voice steady. "But I've spent the last few months trying to understand where it came from. The pressure, the need to control everything, the anger I carried that I didn't even know was there." She didn't ask for anything, not for forgiveness, not for access to Emily. She just spoke plainly about what she'd learned. When the session ended, we stood, and she said, "I want to be better, not just seem better." I nodded once. That night, Emily and I made dinner together, grilled cheese and tomato soup. As we ate, she said, "You know what I'm grateful for today?" I looked up. "What?" "That we're not scared anymore." I reached across the table and held her hand. By the time fall settled in, our home felt different. Not louder or busier, just steadier. Emily had a habit of singing softly while brushing her teeth. Most nights I'd hear her humming something off-key in the hallway before bed. It was small, but I noticed. At school, her confidence had started to show in quieter ways. She raised her hand more often, volunteered to help with classroom cleanup, stood a little taller when walking into the building. Her teacher, Mrs. Garcia, emailed me one afternoon to say Emily had stepped in when another student was being picked on during recess. She hadn't shouted or scolded, just walked over, stood next to the classmate, and said, "Let's go read at the bench." They both walked away without a word to the kids doing the teasing. "She doesn't hesitate to protect others," the message said, "even when it's hard." At home, we were building new traditions. On the last Saturday of each month, we hosted a small potluck at the community garden. Emily made name tags with flower doodles, and I brought pasta or soup in a slow cooker. Taylor came often with her kids, and over time other neighbors joined too. No one asked questions about what had happened earlier that year. They just showed up with baked goods, folding chairs, and paper plates. One afternoon, my Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister, called out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in years, not since a family gathering where she'd quietly disappeared after a disagreement with my parents. "I saw the clip from the party," she said, "and I saw myself in it just 10 years ago saying nothing when I should have said something." She asked if she could visit just for coffee. When she came by the following Sunday, she brought a tin of oatmeal cookies and sat on the couch like she'd never left. They always made me feel like I had to choose between peace and honesty, she said. I should have stood with you sooner. You're here now, I told her. As the weeks passed, we added new names to our circle. One of the moms from Emily's class reached out after the school open house. Her name was Linda. She was also a single parent raising twin boys. We started meeting for coffee on Thursdays, sometimes bringing the kids along after school to do homework at the local library. There was no need to explain the pace we lived at, just a quiet understanding that we were doing the best we could. Catherine stayed in touch, too. In late October, she invited us to a small dinner she was hosting for some of the volunteers from the Children's Advocacy Center, where Melissa had completed her service hours. Emily wore a red sweater with tiny apples on it and helped Catherine set out napkins before guests arrived. After dinner, Catherine and I stood by the sink drying dishes. She handed me a towel and said I spent years thinking that silence was protection. You reminded me that protection sometimes looks like standing up even when no one else will. It wasn't a big moment, but it stayed with me. One afternoon in November, I received a final court notice the restraining order against Melissa was set to expire in January. Attached was a short report from her therapist, summarizing her completion of anger management, ongoing participation in private sessions, and acknowledgement of responsibility. There was no request for renewed contact, just documentation. Later that week, I brought the letter to my next therapy session. Dr. Linton read it and handed it back. You've already created distance and clarity, she said. This doesn't have to open anything unless you want it to. That weekend, Emily and I visited the art museum for a school project. She brought a small sketch pad and copied the outlines of one of the sculptures in the children's gallery. As we walked through the quiet halls, she asked, "Do you think Aunt Melissa really changed?" "I think she's working on it," I said. Emily nodded. "If she ever came back, would I have to talk to her?" "No," I told her. "That would be your choice. Always." At school, Emily's class began a new writing unit, Personal Narratives. She came home one day with an idea for her topic. "I want to write about that day at the party," she said. "But not about the bad part. About how I stood up for myself. About how we left, and how you didn't let anybody scare us." I helped her outline it, but she wrote the words herself. The essay was clear-focused and matter-of-fact. No bitterness, just the truth of what happened and what came after. Her teacher called me 2 days later. "I've never seen her write this openly," she said. "It's not angry. It's steady. It's brave." At home that night, Emily sat on the couch under a blanket with her library book. As I folded laundry nearby, she looked up. "Do you think we're a normal family now?" I looked at her for a second before answering. "I think we're our kind of normal." She smiled and went back to her book. A few days before Christmas, I got a note forwarded through Dr. Bennett's office. It was from Melissa's therapist again. The letter asked if sometime after the restraining order officially ended, I might consider a structured family session, one that could lead to more open communication if and when we felt ready. I didn't respond right away. I set the letter on the desk beside our holiday cards and left it there for a few weeks. Emily never asked about it. We spent the new year quietly. Board games, a blanket fort in the living room, hot chocolate before bed. On January 6th, exactly 1 year from the engagement party, Emily came to me with a small card she'd made. It had a hand-drawn lion on the front. "Let's have a courage celebration," she said. "To remember how we got here, not what happened." We lit a candle that night at dinner, ate chocolate cake with our hands, gave each other tiny gifts that made us laugh. Her gift to me was a keychain shaped like an arrow. For moving forward, she said. I gave her a small pin with a lion cub on it. She clipped it to her backpack. We didn't talk about Melissa that night, or my parents, or the party. We just sat together at the kitchen table, full and warm and whole. That spring, Emily and I planted a row of daffodils along the edge of our apartment walkway. She picked the bulbs herself from the hardware store, carefully choosing the ones with bright yellow petals and frilly centers. Every few days, she'd run outside to check for signs of green, her fingers brushing the soil like she was greeting something sacred. On the day the first one bloomed, she called me outside. "See," she said, beaming. It came back even after the cold. It was a small thing, just one flower nodding in the breeze, but it felt like the right kind of ending. Not the kind where everything ties up in a perfect bow, but the kind where something bruised finally breathes again. By then, Melissa's final message had come and gone. No apology, no demand. Just a note dropped through her lawyer's office saying she understood my decision to keep space, that she hoped one day time would soften things. There was nothing cruel in the words, but there was no warmth either. And I realized I didn't need it, not anymore. My parents never reached out after the hearing. No letter, no phone call, just a silence that no longer felt like punishment, just distance I had learned to live with. I kept the photos from that night in a folder on my computer, not because I wanted to look at them, but because part of healing meant not pretending it didn't happen. Emily didn't ask about them again. She didn't need to. She had a new story to carry forward. In June, she stood in front of her class at the end-of-year assembly and read her personal narrative. She wore her lion cub pin and held her paper steady with both hands. "My mom taught me that brave people don't always roar," she read. "Sometimes they just don't back down." I sat in the front row, watching her read those words in a room full of parents and kids and teachers, and I knew. We had come through the fire, not untouched, but stronger where it counted. That summer, we took a short trip to the mountains with a few friends from our community group. We rented a little cabin with creaky floors and mismatched chairs. At night, we made s'mores by the fire pit and listened to the wind move through the trees. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was ours, our kind of peace. And that's what I've learned most, I think. That healing doesn't come with a courtroom verdict or a public apology. It comes in the quiet moments when your child laughs without flinching, when you trust your own voice again, when your life starts to feel like yours. Some families are built by blood. Others are built by choice, by kindness, by the simple act of being there when it matters most. If you've ever had to walk away from people who didn't protect you, or if you're still trying to find your own kind of family, I hope you know this. You deserve peace, you deserve safety, and you are not alone. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story spoke to you, I'd love to know where you're listening from, and if you feel like it, go ahead and share it with someone who might need a little reminder that courage takes many forms. Until next time, be gentle with yourself.